Hello, everyone. This is Felicia Bell from the Gulf States Regional Office here in Jackson, Mississippi. This, again, is our weekly Wednesday workshop, and we have a fantastic presenter today. It's just she and I, as you can see. We don't have any participants on this particular Wednesday, but we wanted to get the information out, and one reason why is it is one of our office helpmates. It is one of my co-workers in the Gulf States Regional Office, and she's a new member. So Asha Tillman is with us, a livestock specialist, and I wanted to bring her to you all because she has a wealth of information and she's been taught by the best. So I wanted her to share some things, and so we're just going to have a discussion about livestock and kind of get you all thinking about alternative ways, alternative animals, and the way you raise animals. That's her specialty as far as their health. We have so many publications and podcasts and videos about livestock, but we usually are mostly talking about how to feed them, the soil health, the pasture. But sometimes we don't dive heavily into the health of the animal, which the grazing, of course, helps with that. But we wanted to get her perspective. So thank you, Asha, for joining us today.
Thank you, Felicia, for having me. Thank you for that lovely introduction. I love the love that I receive from our office, everyone that works here in our office, and also throughout the organization. It has been a pleasure working with NCAT so far, and I'm just looking forward to the journey that's ahead.
Good. That's good.
So I guess I could introduce myself a little.
Yes, please do.
Sure will. So again, I'm Asha Tillman. I am a Sustainable Agriculture Specialist here in the Gulf States office for NCAT in Jackson, Mississippi. I started off with NCAT as an intern February of last year, and then I graduated to full-time employment. Yay!
Yay, I know.
And it has been a pleasure. It has been a beautiful, beautiful process. Just a little bit about myself going backwards here. I come from Tuskegee. I'm originally from Jackson, Mississippi, but I lived in Tuskegee for 3 years. I attended school at Tuskegee University, where I received my master's in animal science. I did a little research on diurnal behavior of kiko, weather goats, and I basically studied their selected pallets on different browse species that were planted. So that's just a little bit of my background as far as small ruminant education goes. I originally wanted to be a veterinarian, but life has its way of working out on you, and here I am. I am in agriculture, sustainable agriculture, which is growing very much on me. I had not realized how much agriculture background I come from. Growing up, one of my parents are from rural Mississippi in the Delta, and my grandparents owned a small farm. They had several farm animals, cows, chickens, horses, pigs, and they always had a very good and healthy garden that they would pick and eat from. And that's how they survived. And some of those things, that the techniques they use to and throughout their operation were sustainable techniques. And so here I am now with this job where I get to implement some of the things that I already knew, and it has been joyous. The network that I'm gaining here in Mississippi has been beautiful, and I'm just looking forward to growing that network across our region, and looking forward to having more talks just like this.
That's great to hear, and definitely just want everyone to start really learning who we have within the NCAT staff. So again, I think people have realized that I've been interviewing a lot of our ag specialists around the country because you don't really know us. You know our work, but really learning who we are, how we were raised. And majority of our ag specialists, we always like to brag about it. We actually farm. And so these are the type of qualities that we all have for as ag specialists, and Asha is one of them. And so I will let her get started on what she want to share with you pertaining to livestock.
Thank you, Felicia. So the first thing I would like to share about livestock, specifically with small ruminants, is general overall health. One of the things that I learned in doing my research is that there's 3 things I like to think of. You want to be able to maintain, to keep good health with your animals, and that is clean water, minerals. You want to keep minerals available for your animals, and you always want to have a good variety of forage or browse, depending on which small ruminants you're working with. And so one of the things that I've learned, there could be an upside or a downside to not maintaining a good clean water system. So when keeping clean water, some of the benefits are, your animals tend to know where it is. They get used to that. They get acclimated to knowing where their lifeline is. So a lot of folks may or may not farm with water bins in a certain area of their pasture. Animals get used to that. They really do. And also, when you do not maintain clean water, there's all sorts of things that could happen in that water, that could grow in that water. You have algae, bacteria, and things like that. And it could really harm your animals. It could take out a whole flock in a minute. So those are one of the main factors. The other thing is minerals. We know that sometimes browse and forage won't always provide the minerals and the fibers and the essential nutritional needs that your animals need to survive. And so you want to have those on standby, if not always available, where you are stocking your animals. And the last thing, good forage or browse. So that was one of the major part of my major sectors of my research, is that I studied goats' behavior around selecting different browse species. And it's a beautiful process. It's kind of like observing an animal day in and day out, and you're just curious. You sit and watch them. You learn their behaviors are all around their palate to food, and you learn that there are certain things that they like in a certain time of the day, and then you also learn the things that they do when they're not eating, things like that. But overall, a good forage or a good browse are some of the things that I would say you want to be cognizant of while maintaining the health of your small ruminants.
Wow, I definitely love that, and I thank you for giving us those 3 pointers, because one of the things I've noticed that sometimes, and this is just traveling around to our different farmers, they feel like they don't have to clean out the water trough. We get the question why, and like you said, it's like, no, and I usually put it back on them, is like, don't you want to drink clean water? And so it's just, having them think about just the health of their animals. And then, of course, joking aside, I always talk about, the things that could grow within that water that can harm their animal, and really bring it to being serious. Like, it is a reason why we're saying you need to clean the water trough. So we really appreciate just you sharing that. One thing I want to pose a question rather is, most people that have goats want them to graze. So what's your take on that? I think most people know my take on it. So I wanted to hear your take for us. Goats only. Now, we're not speaking about sheep. We're not speaking about cattle, but only goats.
Felicia, that is a great question. First and foremost, goats' preference is to browse. And so grazing is not one of their ways of getting their nutrition, preferred ways of getting their nutrition, because we all know that there's parasites and things like that. Goats are really, really smart, by the way. Um, they prefer to browse because they're more susceptible to these parasites. And browsing, they're able to pick from the top of the plant species, which is high off the ground, more than those 3 inches, which is where the parasite tends to grow off of the plant. They prefer to browse off the top of those plants versus grazing, which is really low to the ground, which means they're more susceptible to catching those parasites. So again, that speaks to learning goats' behavior, because how would anyone know that about goats, right? You study them. And it's just like us. We all know there's certain things we're supposed to eat, we're not supposed to eat, and we have a way about selecting it. So most people, a lot of people I have heard, they want their goats to graze because it's probably easier for them to do like some type of pasture management, or it's easier for them to do pastures for the animals to graze. But depending on what type of animal you have, which in this case, we're talking about goats, you know, plant them some brown species, and that will reward your entire operation, the health of your goats, how much weight they're putting on, their behavior in general, even breeding. It will affect all of those things in a positive way, because that's the goat's natural instinct, is to browse. So that was a good question.
Thank you so much for that. Two things you spoke on that I'll chime in, because again, we're having a discussion and definitely want everyone to hear Asha's just her awesome viewpoint of the work she did at Tuskegee, the research. When you're, as farmers, we're with our animals every single day, but when you have the different universities that are note-taking and documenting, that's a whole different story, because they are there to help us learn what to do and what not to do because of that notation and the documentation. So I really, really want everyone to hear her story for as all of that research. Two of the things you said I wanted to kind of chime in on. One is and I want to go back to it really, is the parasites. One of the things that we have tried to do just within the NCAT staff around the country, but especially from the Gulf States Regional Office, is training the farmers not to graze low. And so really getting them into a pasture management of letting things grow taller. See, most of us want to cut it. We see it tall and we want to cut the grass. And it's very, very hard to get people just to leave it alone. Leave it alone. We need these grasses, depending on the species now, because we don't really want it to get to, we don't at all, get to the seed head, because now it's losing nutrition. And so we want it to grow tall, but you as a farmer have to look at your pasture. You have to walk out there and look at the species of grasses you have, and then you will determine when it's time to put that animal into the pasture. So you don't want it to get to a seed head, but you want to get it taller than 4 inches. Preferably 6, 8, 10, 12. We have farmers around the country that are very, very tall. They get up there, and we're talking about without some seed heads, and some forage you can let it seed out, and because it may be a certain type of wheat or rye, and the animals like it. So it's just the farmer has to know what's out there. So please keep in mind, we don't want you to graze low. And Asha is so right, for as the parasite crawling up that grass blade, and it usually falls off. at that 3-4 inch. I always say it's usually I think 2 inches, but I like to tell farmers 4 because we get lazy, and I'm one of them where we forget to move. Not lazy all the time, but I forget to move them, or I get busy, and then they take out that other 2 inches, and it's like, okay, it's time to go. I got to move them. So always add in that buffer in case you just cannot move them that day. And then they won't have parasite issues and stuff. And I forgot the other thought you made, I forgot what you said. So we'll move on, and I'll think of the second one, or you may bring it back up, but it was some very good pointers that you made. Oh, I know, silvopasture. Yes. So when you said them planting browse and weeds, I felt farmers out there cringing. They're like, I will not plant that in my pasture.
Yes. It's a lot of work. It is. It's a lot of work. And actually, it's a lot of maintenance between your goats and maintaining those browse plants that you've planted. It is a lot of work. I know that this is one of the practices that has been developed in Nepal. It's a huge practice. It's utilizing, natural plants that are available as silvopasture for your animals. But the one thing I want to speak to, Felicia, that you just said, you don't necessarily have to plant browse plants for your animals. There are lucrative ways now that goat meat, the goat meat industry is becoming more and more due to different cultures located in the southeast region of the U.S. There are different practices that are being implemented that does not necessarily contribute or cater to goats' palate as far as them preferring browse over grazing. But I will speak to some grazing things that I know, that I've learned in the past, and that is different things you can plant, like hairy vetch, clover, crimson clover, arrowleaf clover, ball leaf clover. Those are some of the things that you can plant, and you can allow your goats to graze, and they'll be just fine. Another thing that you spoke on, which was that parasite, right? If you are developing good grazing management practices, you plant your seeds, you start seeding, you let it grow, you give it some time to grow, and you want it to grow definitely past those 3 inches off the ground, preferably 6 to 8 inches off the ground, because we all know how fast goats can eat, right? Depending on how many goats you have stocked per acre, then you will be able to tell when it's time for you to move those animals. One of the things that I would always monitor is when allowing your goats to go inside a pasture to graze, you want to keep watch of how much they're eating. Some people use yardsticks and things like that. I did myself. I use a yardstick. I would go out there every other day, just checking on those minerals in that clean water. And I would measure how much they have eaten day to day or every other day. And of course, like I said, once it gets close to that 3 to 4 inch marker to the ground, then you want to move them on to the next pasture, because that's when the goats are becoming more and more susceptible to catching that homunculus contortus, which is that parasite we do not like. So yeah, that's one thing I'm not totally against. I'm absolutely not against grazing. Yes. It's one of the more fundamental and affordable and less time-consuming ways for a lot of small ruminant farmers who may not have all the resources they can have or they can use to make their operation easier. And another thing you talked about was silvopasture. So with silvopasture, I got into it. I learned a little bit here, I learned a little bit there, so I will speak to what I know. With silvopasture, the setup that we had at Tuskegee, at one of our demonstration sites, was we had a large area of land, and we had it broken out into 1-acre plots. And in those 1-acre plots, we had natural trees, oak, pine, and a couple of other, and we had some browse species planted, and that we knew that goats, their palate were preferred to that. And then we had some of those grazing grasses like rye and the ball leaf clover, those legumes that are really good for your soil. We also had a lot of seasonal or annual planting, which was, I will want to say again, that's the rye. We had some, it's going to come to me in a minute. We had a lot of things going on there. We had the rye, we had the Bermuda grass, and things like that planted for the goats to graze on. So the setup that we had, we would allow the goats to come into those different acres. We allow them to graze. We monitor their behavior throughout the day. And we will take measurements of how much they've eaten that day, how much of what species they have eaten that day. And then we will move them to the next pasture, the next plot for them to graze. And I will tell you one thing about silver pasture. If there are some trees, like pine trees, that your goats may like, if you leave them in there too long, they will attack those pine trees and it will kill them. They will debark those trees because it's something in the bark that they really, really love. And it's actually not so good because it has high tannins. Pine trees have high tannins in the bark and it can kill them or it can make them really, really sick. So those are some of the smaller, minute things that I have gained from learning silver pasture. But yeah, there's so much to learn about it. Silver pasture, agroforestry, all those things are great techniques in having a small ruminant operation.
And I'm so glad you mentioned, because we get that question, oh my goodness, all these years of working with farmers when we would visit, and hopefully soon we can get back to visiting our farmers, but I would see the debark. And they, after a while, farmers felt like it was normal. And I'm like, that's not normal. And I was like, they are not getting enough minerals. You're whatever, if you're giving minerals, you're not giving it. So one of the things I want to share with farmers is trace mineral block. If you're doing just straight salt, that's not always what animals need. And we're talking about all ruminants at this point. So please, please think about trace mineral blocks. Think about, working with someone in your local area to get you the minerals conducive for your animals. See, most people won't do that. They'll just go buy a block, from the co-op, from Tractor Supply, but that does not mean it has all the nutrients and the minerals that your animal needs. So you have to make sure that you're giving what your particular animal needs, because you will lose your animal if they don't have enough minerals. I can tell you that that is what happens to us. We do not get enough trace minerals within our food. And so which bring on health issues and stuff. Two more things. We here at NCAT could definitely help you with your paddocks, calculating, and your stocking density, and learning what Asha talked about, going out there with your yardstick. So the farmers that said, why did she do that? Or what is she talking about? And we kind of, lost you with that. It is part of pasture management. You definitely could learn. It is a math equation for the people that really don't want to do math. If you really want a good pasture management and learn how to set up your paddocks, it's a little math involved, but nothing, that you as a farmer cannot do. And so definitely our NCAT staff can help you with learning how to calculate your paddocks based upon your stock and density, as well as what Asha mentioned, how much grass you have. So you will have to go out there with a yardstick or a grazing stick and see how much forage grows on your land already. Before you plant a seed, how much forage do your land produce? And so those are things that we as NCAT specialists can help you with. So please, email us, call. We definitely can help you with that. The third thing you mentioned, Asha, was the clovers. And I wanted to ask you about bloat. Do we have that issue with goats when it comes to bloat? And please, if we do, please explain to farmers how to keep that from happening when they plant clovers.
So a lot of folks know this about goats, that they have a very similar, I would say even the same palate as deer do, white-tailed deer, specifically for here in Mississippi. And the reason I say that is because that's one of the ways that we have learned some of the things that small ruminants specifically goes like by studying other animals, right? Different deer and things like that. So one of the things that I would suggest for small ruminant farmers when planting to keep from having issues with bloat in their animals is you want to plant a variety. You don't want to plant a lot of clover or all clover. Folks love to do that because, like I said, that's one of the things that by word of mouth or by, just by passing on through generations or however you want to call it, one thing people will say is that goats love clover. You don't always want to feed them what they love because it's not always healthy for them. They get that bloat and then it can cause them to really be sick, and they'll stop eating and they'll lose weight really fast because their metabolism is high. So one of the things that we did with planting clover, like I said, it was a variety. We would do clover, we would do chicory. We will also do different varieties of clover because not all clovers affect goats the same way. Not all clovers cause bloat in goats depending on how much they're consuming. So just to speak to that, I would say variety. You don't want to plant one species and have them grazing on that one species for an extended period of time.
I appreciate you going back and explaining that because yes, we do have farmers that possibly will just go out and plant an acre or 2 acres of clover and you're like, no, don't do that. So please, a variety. And that's with ruminants in general, not just goats. It's okay to plant clovers, but please plant it within a variety, or if you plant an acre, 2 or more of clovers, you have it fenced off and you're putting your animals within it and you're pulling them out. So that you take them in, they stay in there for a day and then they're coming out. Or they're standing there for a few hours and you're taking them out, whatever your management style is. But again, we keep speaking to the notion of pasture management. You have to learn what is conducive for the animals that you're raising. So that means what Asha said is behavior, learning the nutritional need of your animal. This is research questions. And so we always want to empower our farmers to learn what they have. What are you growing? What are you raising? And what are the needs of what you're doing on your land? So, wow. That's amazing. I thank you for clarifying that because we definitely don't want to hurt any animals that we are raising. Another point is silvopasture. So one thing that most farmers really kind of push back on is fencing around trees. They really don't want to do that. And I understand why. One is difficult, especially when you have underbrush, but goats love it. So I always try to not necessarily tell farmers to do permanent fencing around the tree line. It is farmers around the country that have done that because they understand the benefit of underbrush and you know what you can do with agroforestry and silvopasture methodology. So they already have learned how it can benefit them on their farm. But for the new farmers to this concept, you could do temporary fencing. I always say temporary fencing is our best friend when we're testing things out. And so test that. See, you know, the goat producers, see what your goats will do with the forage and browse you have in your tree line. Just put up temporary fencing, let them go in and see, you know, do they like it? What they do with it? Do they eat most of it? Do they go in and eat it up like it's candy? Like they just go in and they ravishly eat it up? That means they love it. And so test things out. Just because, like, Asha is from a research university, but as farmers, we can do research on our land as well. It's just not as vast as a university. It's not as large as a university research plot, but we can do types of research on our land to learn what to do with our animals, how to do things on just a smaller scale. So I appreciate you, Asha, just sharing that and stuff, and then I'll hand it back to you to continue.
Yeah, so those are all really, really good points. And yes, I have worked with some farmers who have found it to be very tedious to do fencing around trees. But again, silvopasture, having a silvopasture operation is very beneficial, especially when you want to speak to regenerative sustainability agricultural practices, right? So some of those things are trees provide shade. We know here in the South, it can get really hot. The sun beams down. Sometimes you may have a shed for your animals to be in, but it's way somewhere else. You can't move it. It's not one of those removable sheds. And so trees become really helpful for that. Also, the limbs or the leaves that fall from the trees, it actually helps decompose the fecal matter or the poop from the goats. It actually helps all that to decompose and return to the earth. So it's one big life cycle, right? I really push for silvopasture because it has all of these beautiful benefits. And again, like you said, it can also have some downfalls. I want to go back to speaking about those, the goats debarking and how it is a sign that goats are lacking nutrition. Yes, very, very, very true. You don't want to have your animals inside of paddock too long to where they're lacking nutrition. They no longer have browse or forage to graze, and they're now debarking and damaging your trees that you have there to last for a lifetime. So one of the things that, again, I would suggest is putting mineral blocks out. Trace minerals, like you said, are really, really great for goats. Also, another thing is with planting different clovers, those legumes, they have proven that because they are legumes, they have the nitrogen fixation. They actually attack some of those they help to build those microbes to help your goats digest really well, digest their food really, really well. And then that in turns eliminate on some of the bloat. Also, with those legumes, they have a higher content in mineral, so you do not have to put out mineral blocks as much as you normally would with some other grazing forages and things like that. So it's kind of like one big circle. You plant your legumes, you plant your grazing, you seed for your grazing plants, and then you graze them on a time schedule so that they're not debarking your trees. They're getting their adequate amount of minerals and nutrients so they're not debarking your trees. And it's also cutting down on some of that bloat because those microbes are working in their bellies to help their rumen do what it's supposed to do. All of those things are really, really, it's beautiful when you're able to observe goats again and their behavior around some of these silvopasture systems, because that's just what it is. If you spend some time with your animals, you will learn so much about them. And once you know more, then you start to implement different practices and things like that. And I hear you say, I come from a research standpoint. I do, but some of the most fundamental things I have learned about animals is simply by me watching them. A book couldn't teach me that.
Yes.
So I really, I encourage farmers. I know that life is busy, life is crazy sometimes, especially right now. People are transitioning their businesses with COVID and all those things like that. But one of the best ways to learn your animal is to just observe them. Seriously, is to observe them day in and day out. You learn so much about them, what they like, the times of the day that they like to lie or loft, or whatever the case may be, the times of the day that they like to graze, and all of those things. So I would really encourage farmers to do that.
I love that, and I appreciate you sharing that, because it is, animal behavior will really, really just open your eyes up. Two things I wanted to share with everyone. I was always taught that you had to put your eyeballs on your animals. Like, you never just start raising animals and you put them out in a pasture. And we know we have farmers that sometimes their pastures are not near them. They have to drive a distance. But we still have to drive the distance. You know, we still have to really put our eyes on our animals to make sure they're healthy. If an animal is moving off to the side, we know something is wrong with that animal, because that's why we say we have herds, because they do move in herds and they move as a flock, and, you know, however you want to define it, but they move together. And so those are the signs when an animal pull itself out from the herd. That's the sign that, you know, you got to see what's going on. We always hope that it's something minor, you know, like a little thorn or something in their hooves. We want it to be minor all the time, but it is an indication to us to get in that pasture, go check that animal, and make sure it doesn't have something that can affect the other herd, because that's why they pull away. They don't want to hurt everybody else, and so they pull away. And so we have to make sure we're making, you know, doing those management, I guess what I said, the eyes and, you know, the physical management things we need to do for us going out, getting in the pasture, driving in the pasture, whatever we need to do to make sure our animals are up to par. The second thing that I was taught and have learned and is doing now is what Asha spoke about, utilizing our silvopasture. I always was raised on the notion that we didn't build barns. One reason why we didn't financially have all this money to build barns everywhere. And so we just, when I come along, my grandfather, it was always tree line. The animals knew to go in the tree lines to get away from the sun, like Asha said, and also the rain and, you know, hail and storms and whatever else we have going on in our areas. But as a child, one of the things I could never understand, they automatically went. Like when we had heat or it was very, very hot, they just automatically started walking themselves into the tree line. And so as a little girl, I was like, why are they doing that? Like, they just automatically know. And so when I went in there with them, I was like, wow, I see why y'all like it in here. Because it was cool. It was, you know, have like the damp feeling. And then the time I went in there was raining, and it wasn't a drop of rain got on me, because the canopy was so thick that it wasn't raining in there. And so I was like, now I know why you all go in here, and it's an automatic, like, oh, we got to go to shelter, because that's what they knew it was shelter. So Definitely not telling farmers not to build barns, but for the farmers that just don't always have the finances, please think about silvopasture. You know, do the research. We have plenty publications on silvopasture. And of course, you could talk to specialists about it in your area. But silvopasture is a way to go when it comes to you know, management and helping you with your animals and stuff. So please look into that if it's something new to you. And it just really will help you in the long run and stuff. So Asha, we got a few minutes left, so I definitely want to hand it back to you to close us out in any manner you see fit.
Yeah, just to speak to what you said about the shelter. I too have observed goats. They are so funny. I've seen goats in pastures with nice big sheds to fit them all, right? They have all the space in the world. But a lot of times when they do not go into the shed, you go inside the shed and guess what? It's like hot or there's fecal matter everywhere. They know that that's not good for them. That can cause little things to get into their hooves, or it could just make them sick because that is fecal, and that's the constant vicious cycle of the homunculus contortus parasite that attacks them and it could kill them. So again, they're very smart and they're just showing you how smart they are. I have witnessed goats have big sheds to fit them all, but they would prefer to sit under a tree. Why? Because there's more air. There's not a buildup of fecal matter. They're able to just look around because they're animals. They're animals naturally. They want to see their environment, you know. So that's a really interesting thing. And all of these things, again, are just by observing them. Very simple. Enjoy your animals one morning, get up, have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, and sit out and just watch your animals, especially small ruminants because they're diurnal species. So that means that their hours of operation are from dusk to dawn. Get up, have a cup of coffee, and just start your day off with them. And, you know, check in on them throughout the day. And you will see the many transitions of what they do throughout the day. And it tells you so much about them. It speaks to how to maintain their health, what to feed them, how often to give them water, all of these great things. And so I just had to make that known because observing your animals is really, really important to me. I do not have any animals myself right now, but I promise you, my goal is to get my little small operation started. And when I do, that's one of the first things I'm going to do. I am going to make friends with my animals. I am going to let them know that I'm here to observe them, and hopefully they can give me some service back as well. And I guess I could close out with just keeping tabs of all of these things, record keeping. If you are one of those farmers who really like to keep tabs, which is a very, very good habit to have when you have any type of operation, recording how often you're transitioning your animals from different paddocks, recording how often you're seeding, recording what height are your grazes or your browses today after feeding or before allowing your animals to graze or browse. Just analyzing, you know, how often your clovers and things are budding, and, you know, different seasonal changes. All of those things are really, really important. We all know that record keeping can be a hassle at times, but there's beauty in it. You start to see trends and you start to see some of the things that you can help prevent on paper, and that you can implement in your practices. So that's a huge, major factor. And that could easily segue into another talk, Felicia. And I know you know that because I know you're big on record keeping with your farm as well. So who knows? Maybe we could get into that next week. I'm not sure. We could talk about a little bit of everything, but I have enjoyed this talk today, and I really, really thank you for inviting me to talk and allowing me to use my knowledge of what I have on small ruminant practices to share with the world.
Thank you so much. And yes, 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 you're always invited to speak on your knowledge, because this is what NCAT do. We share. We share our knowledge. We share, what we actually have done with our constituents, with our farmer clients. And we just want to make sure we're giving you the best and the high quality of knowledge that we know. And then if we make a mistake, it's not intentionally and you cough it up to they just don't know. Because we're just trying to give you the best that we can give you, but also keep in mind where we are. A lot of the information, of course, from our various sites, you have to think about the microclimate, where we are in the country. And so you may hear things that I talk about on these webinars that won't work in your area. That's why we have offices in your area, and you could talk with those specialists because, again, we're in the South. We could do so much more than some of the areas and states that are more cold and don't have a long growing season. And so please, we're sharing what we're actually doing, but just keep in mind we are in the South. So Asha, you're always welcome. And yes, whatever topic you want to do next week, we're very open to that because it is so much more to learn when it comes to livestock. So much, so much. And one of the things I wanted to share with everyone is send your questions to us. So my particular information is Felicia B, Felicia, B as in boy, at ncat.org. And then Asha, could you share yours as well?
Yes, my email address is Asha, ASHAT, at NCAT.org. Please ask away, ask any questions. I'm here.
Yeah, we definitely always want to give our information out because that's what we're here for. We just want to be able to share with you all of the things that our specialists have done around the country, and always want to point you to our website where all of this information is housed. It's at ATTRA, ATTRA.NCAT.org. So please take a look. There is a wealth of information for anything that you do. I promise you, it is so much information on our website, and all of our publications are free. And so please just go take a look and see what we have available that can assist you. But once you do some of that research and you have questions, we are always here to assist you. We also have our 1-800 phone line as well as our chat line. So we have so many means of getting in touch with us. So please do that. And so Asha, thank you again for joining us today. And we learned a lot, just this few minutes. It is so much more that we could talk about, but we thank you for your time today. And we want to just invite everyone back to our weekly Wednesday workshops. Always is 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Always check out our event page at ncat.org/events, as well as our Facebook page. That's where we usually announce our weekly Wednesday workshops, who our speaker will be, and our topic for that particular week. So thanks everybody for watching. And if you have any questions, just, let any of our specialists have them, and we will do our best to answer them. So thanks, Asha, and we will talk to you next week.
Thank you. See y'all next week.